The last thing you expect when you're surrounded by family is to feel a cold knife of loneliness in your back. But that's what I felt. It wasn't a real knife, not yet anyway. It was the feeling you get when you look into the eyes of people who are supposed to love you, and you see nothing. Absolutely nothing. Just empty rooms behind their smiling faces. They all thought I was a frail old man, lost in my memories and my money. They were half right. I was old. But I wasn't lost. I was watching. And what I was starting to see made my heart pound with a fear colder than any winter night. My name is Arthur. I am 82 years old, and for most of those years, I built an empire from dust. I worked until my hands were sore and my mind was tired, all for them. For my family. I wanted them to have everything I never did. And they did. They lived in a world of gold and silk, inside the towering walls of my mansion. A home so big you could get lost in it. And I was lost in my own home, a ghost walking through hallways filled with the echoes of laughter that didn't seem real. A king in a golden cage, slowly realizing the bars were built by the very people I loved. My wife, Eleanor, would kiss my cheek, but her lips felt like ice. My children, Robert and Clara, would visit every day, asking about my health with voices full of care, but their eyes were always looking past me, at the paintings on the wall, at the size of the rooms, as if measuring their inheritance. My grandchildren would run to hug my legs, their little hands patting my pockets, already learning that Grandpa was a walking bank account. They were all there, a perfect picture of a happy family. But pictures can lie. Theirs was the biggest lie of all. Only one soul in this entire mansion felt real. Barnaby, my old golden retriever. His eyes were cloudy with age, he couldn't see a thing. But he saw more than any of them. He would rest his heavy head on my knee, his warm breath a quiet promise that I wasn't alone. He didn't care about my money. He didn't want my company shares or my expensive cars. He just wanted me. When the family's fake smiles became too much, Barnaby's soft, rumbling snore was the only honest sound in the house. He was my anchor in a sea of lies. If you have ever felt a little bit lonely, even in a room full of people, if you have ever looked at someone you love and wondered if they truly see you, then you will understand my story. It's a story about a very quiet, very terrible secret. I beg you, please, if my story touches even a small part of your heart, consider subscribing to this channel. You would be giving an old man a reason to believe that there is still kindness in this world, that my voice is being heard somewhere far away from these cold, empty walls. The strange things started small. A whisper that would stop the moment I entered a room. A shared look between my son and my wife that would vanish too quickly. One afternoon, my son Robert was helping me with my pills. He dropped one on the floor. "Oh, clumsy me," he said, picking it up. But the pill he put back in the bottle looked different. A little paler. When I asked, he just laughed. "Dad, you're seeing things. It's the same pill." Barnaby, who was lying by my feet, let out a low, soft growl, a sound I had not heard from him in years. "I know you are watching this from all over the world, from places I have only ever seen on a map. Please, do me a small kindness and tell me in the comments where you are watching from. It would make me feel a little less alone, knowing there are good people out there listening. I truly believe that when we share our stories, we share our hearts. And for everyone who does, I pray that you and your family are blessed with true loyalty and a love that never fades. May you never feel the cold emptiness that was starting to creep into my home." Then my health took a turn. I felt tired all the time. My thoughts became foggy, like trying to see through a thick mist. The doctor, a young man my daughter Clara insisted I see, would pat my hand and say, "It's perfectly normal for your age, Arthur. You just need to rest more." My family agreed with him eagerly. "Yes, Dad, rest," they would all say in a chorus, their voices like a sweet, sickly syrup. They started managing more of my affairs, signing documents for me, telling me not to worry my tired old head about it. I was becoming a prisoner in my own life. One evening, my wife brought me my dinner tray. A simple soup and some bread. I wasn't very hungry, so I offered a piece of bread dipped in the soup to Barnaby. He always loved sharing my food. But this time, he sniffed it, whined, and backed away from my hand. He looked up at me, his blind eyes somehow filled with a desperate warning. He pushed his nose against my hand, nudging it away from the bowl. A shiver that had nothing to do with the cold ran down my spine. My dog, my blind, loyal dog, was trying to tell me something. Later that night, Eleanor brought me my glass of warm milk, just as she had for 30 years. "Drink up, my love," she whispered, kissing my forehead. "It will help you sleep." She turned and left, her shadow long in the dim light of the hallway. I looked at the glass, then I happened to glance at the dark window of my bedroom. In its reflection, I could see her walking away down the hall. For just a second, a single, terrifying second, the loving smile on her face was gone. Replaced by a look of such cold, greedy triumph, it felt like a bucket of ice water had been thrown on my soul. At that exact moment, Barnaby, sitting by my bed, slowly lifted his paw and placed it on my arm, a silent, desperate plea. That reflection in the window was a ghost that would never leave me. The loving face of my wife, Eleanor, had peeled away for just a second, showing the cold, hard mask underneath. I sat there, staring at the glass of warm milk she had given me. It looked so innocent, so white and pure. But now it felt like a cup of poison. My hand trembled as I reached for it. Beside me, Barnaby whined, a low, sad sound in the quiet room. He knew. My blind old dog knew something was terribly wrong, and in that moment, I knew it too. I had to get rid of the milk, but how? How could I do it without them knowing? The next morning, my heart pounded as I carried the full glass from my room. Eleanor saw me and smiled. "Did you not enjoy your milk, dear?" she asked, her voice dripping with fake concern. "No, my love," I replied, forcing a weak smile. My stomach felt a little unsettled. I walked to the large potted fern in the hallway, a plant I had cared for years. With my back turned to her, I quickly poured the milk into the soil. It was a small act of defiance, a tiny secret in a house that was now full of them. Over the next few days, I watched that fern. The leaves began to turn yellow, then brown, before they shriveled and died. The whispers grew louder, or maybe I just got better at listening. They were like snakes, slithering through the grand hallways of my home. I would hear my children, Robert and Clara, talking in low voices in the library. Words like papers, doctors, and soon would hang in the air for a moment before they saw me and fell silent. "Just talking about the weather, Dad," Clara would say, smiling brightly. But her eyes could not hide the secret she was keeping. Barnaby would always stand between me and them, a silent, furry wall. He would not let them get too close, as if he could smell the lies on their breath. They began to control my world in small, cruel ways. My favorite armchair, which had faced the garden for 20 years, was moved to face a blank wall. "It's better for your neck, Dad," Robert said. My newspaper would arrive with pages missing. "A printing error," they'd say. They were building a cage around me, brick by brick, lie by lie. They wanted me to see only what they wanted me to see, to know only what they wanted me to know. I was a king trapped in a single square of his own chessboard, and my own family was moving all the other pieces. Why did they need to hide things from me? What were they doing in the study with the door locked? I would sit in my new, wrong-facing chair and wonder if I was going crazy. Maybe they were right. Maybe my mind was getting old and confused. But then I would feel Barnaby's warm head on my lap, and his steady breathing would calm my fears. An animal doesn't lie. A dog doesn't plot. His simple, honest love was the one true thing left in my life, and it told me that I was not the one who was sick. The sickness was in the hearts of my family. One day, I decided to look for answers. I remembered my son, Robert, had been acting strangely around the bookshelf in the main study. He always seemed to be adjusting the same book. When everyone was out, I went to the study. Barnaby followed me, sticking close to my legs. I pulled the book from the shelf. It was an old book on gardening, one I hadn't opened in years. But it felt different. Lighter. I opened it, and my breath caught in my throat. The inside pages had been cut out, creating a secret hiding spot. And nestled inside was a small, thin syringe, the kind a doctor might use. My blood ran cold. A syringe? Why would Robert hide a syringe inside a book? I put it back exactly as I had found it, my hands shaking so much I could barely close the cover. I felt like a spy in my own home, a detective in a crime that was happening to me. I walked back to my room and sat on my bed, my mind racing. What was in that needle? Was it for me? The fear was so strong it was like a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. I was surrounded by enemies who wore the faces of the people I loved most in the world. That night at dinner, I couldn't eat. I just watched them. I watched them laugh and talk about their plans for the future. A future that, I was beginning to realize, did not include me. They looked so normal, so happy. How could people who looked so good on the outside be so rotten on the inside? It was like finding a beautiful, red apple, only to bite into it and find it full of worms. Every smile they gave me felt like a threat. Every kind word felt like a lie. I was trapped at a dinner table with smiling monsters. Later, I was looking for an old photo album in the guest room where Robert sometimes stayed. I opened a drawer to search for it, my fingers brushing against his neatly folded sweaters. Underneath them, my hand hit something small and hard. A little bottle. My heart stopped. It was a small glass bottle with no label, filled with a clear liquid. It looked exactly like the bottle of eye drops my new doctor had given me for my tired eyes. But why would Robert have an identical, unlabeled bottle hidden away in his drawer? A terrible thought began to form in my mind, a thought so dark it scared me. That night, I went to bed but I could not sleep. I lay there in the dark, my eyes wide open, listening to the old house groan around me. Sometime after midnight, my bedroom door creaked open. A thin slice of light cut across the dark room. I quickly closed my eyes, pretending to be asleep, my heart hammering against my ribs. I could hear soft footsteps. Someone was walking towards my bed. Through my eyelashes, I saw it was my daughter, Clara. She stood over me for a long moment, watching me breathe. Then, slowly, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a tiny dropper. She moved silently towards the glass of water on my bedside table. I held my breath, pretending to be deep in sleep. The air in the room grew heavy as my own daughter, Clara, stood over me like a shadow. I heard the softest plink, plink, plink as 3 drops fell from her dropper into the glass of water by my bed. My heart felt like it was going to beat right out of my chest. She waited for a moment, her silhouette unmoving in the moonlight. Then, as silently as she came, she turned and slipped out of the room, pulling the door almost closed behind her. I lay there in the dark, my eyes wide open, staring at the glass. It looked the same, but I knew it was now filled with a terrible secret. I did not sleep for the rest of the night. That glass of water sat on my bedside table like a ticking bomb. I knew I couldn't drink it, but I also knew that if they found it full in the morning, they would become suspicious. They would know I was watching them. I had to get rid of it. As the sun began to paint the sky with soft morning colors, I heard the house begin to stir. My mind raced, searching for a plan. I was weak, a prisoner in my own room, but my mind, though foggy at times, was still my own. My only friend, Barnaby, whined softly from the floor, as if he could feel my fear. When Clara came in with my breakfast tray, I put my plan into action. "Good morning, Dad," she chirped, her voice sickeningly sweet. "Did you sleep well?" I nodded slowly. As I reached for the tray, I leaned over to pat Barnaby's head. With a clumsy, shaking hand, I accidentally knocked the glass of water over. It crashed onto the thick carpet, soaking a dark patch. "Oh, how silly of me," I mumbled. "My hands are so weak today." I watched Clara's face carefully. For just a second, a flash of pure anger crossed her eyes before she covered it with a patient smile. "Don't worry, Dad. I'll clean it up." My health started to slide downhill, fast. It felt like my body was made of wet sand, and I was slowly sinking into myself. Some mornings, the room would spin when I tried to stand up. My memories, once so sharp and clear, now felt like old, faded photographs. I would forget names, dates, and even what I had for lunch. Was this old age, as they kept telling me? Or was this the work of the little drops in my water, the strange taste in my tea, the different colored pills? I was trapped in a fog, and I didn't know if it was my mind or my family creating it. They used my weakness against me at every turn. They brought in a new doctor, a man named Dr. Finch, who had cold eyes and a smile that never reached them. He changed my medicines, giving me new pills that made me feel even sleepier, even more confused. "These will help with the dizziness, Arthur," he'd say. But they didn't. They made it worse. I felt like a puppet, and my own family was pulling the strings, making me dance to their silent, deadly song. Who was this new doctor? And why did he only seem to listen to my children instead of me? One afternoon, my son Robert came into my study with a stack of papers and a pen. "Dad, we just need you to sign these," he said, spreading them out on the desk. "They're just some boring company papers." He pointed to the lines where I needed to sign. The words were small and blurry, a meaningless dance of black ink. I felt a cold dread in my stomach. What was I signing? Was I signing away my company? My home? My life? I looked at my son, searching his face for a sign of the little boy I used to read bedtime stories to. But he was gone. I knew I needed help. I had to reach someone from the outside world. My oldest friend, a lawyer named Henry, would know what to do. One day, when everyone was out in the garden, I shuffled to the phone in the library. I picked up the receiver, my heart pounding with hope. But there was no sound. No dial tone. Just silence. They had cut the line. A new wave of despair washed over me. The cage was now locked, and there was no key. I was completely and utterly alone, with no way to call for help. The world outside these walls might as well have been on a different planet. That night, through the fog of my sleepy mind, I overheard a name I didn't recognize. My wife and children were talking in the hallway, their voices low and urgent. "Mr. Gable says we need to hurry," Robert whispered. "He said the final transfer can happen on Friday." Eleanor replied, "Your father is getting weaker. He won't question anything now. Mr. Gable will get everything he's been promised." Who is Mr. Gable? The name sounded dangerous, like a wolf circling in the dark. A new player had entered the game, and I felt like time was running out. My only comfort, my only guard, was Barnaby. He rarely left my side now. He would sleep on the floor by my bed, a warm, furry lump in the dark. He would follow me from room to room. He started to growl, a low rumble in his chest, whenever Robert or Clara came too close to me. He would stand between us, a loyal soldier protecting his king. One afternoon, as Clara tried to hand me a cup of tea, Barnaby nudged her hand so hard that the hot liquid spilled all over her. She screamed in anger, not at the pain, but at the dog. "That stupid, useless animal," she shrieked. But I saw the truth. He wasn't useless. He was the only one trying to save me. That night, lying in bed, a memory sparked in the fog of my mind. It was a memory from over 20 years ago. There had been a thief among the cleaning staff, so I had a tiny camera, no bigger than a button, installed in the old grandfather clock in my office. It was an old piece of technology, and I had forgotten about it for decades. Did it still work? Could it even record? It was a desperate, foolish hope. But it was the only hope I had. I had to know for sure. With every ounce of strength I had left, I pushed myself out of bed, my legs shaking like newborn deer. I had to make it to the office, unseen and unheard, and pray that a forgotten secret from the past could save my future. The floorboards were freezing cold against my bare feet. Every step was a mountain to climb. My legs, which had once carried me through boardrooms and across continents, now shook so badly I had to hold onto the wall to keep from falling. The grandfather clock in my office felt like it was 100 miles away. Barnaby pressed against my leg, a warm, steady presence in the terrifying dark. He didn't make a sound, but I could feel his encouragement, his silent promise to stay with me. It was as if he knew this was our only chance. This crazy, desperate plan was all we had left. The hallway was a tunnel of shadows. Every creak of the old house sounded like a gunshot in the silence. I froze when a floorboard groaned under my weight, my heart leaping into my throat. I listened, straining my ears for any sound of movement from my family's bedrooms. Nothing. Just the quiet hum of the giant refrigerator downstairs. The portraits of my ancestors on the wall seemed to watch me with sad eyes, as if they knew the terrible secret that now lived within their home. I was a thief in my own house, stealing back my own life. When I finally reached the office, I almost collapsed with relief. The room was dark, but the moonlight spilling through the window was enough to see. There it stood in the corner, the giant grandfather clock. It was like an old, sleeping giant. For a moment, doubt washed over me. Was the memory real? Had I really put a camera in there? Or was this just another foggy dream from my tired mind? What if I opened it and found nothing but old, dusty clock parts? What would I do then? The thought made my whole body feel heavy with despair. My fingers trembled as I fumbled with the small key to open the clock's wooden door. The lock was stiff from years of not being used. It finally clicked open with a loud, sharp sound that made me jump. I pulled the door open, revealing the long, golden pendulum. My eyes searched the dark, dusty corners inside. And then I saw it. Tucked away on a small wooden ledge, covered in a thin layer of dust, was a tiny black circle, no bigger than my thumbnail. The camera. It was real. A tiny flicker of hope, bright and warm, lit up the cold fear in my heart. Now came the hardest part. Would it even work after all this time? I reached in, my hand shaking, and felt for a switch. My fingers found a tiny nub of plastic. I pushed it. Nothing happened. No light, no sound. My heart sank. It was just an old, dead piece of equipment. A useless memory. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. It was over. I was a foolish old man chasing ghosts. I leaned my head against the clock, defeated. The smell of old wood and dust filled my nose. I had failed. They had already won. But as I pulled my hand away, my finger brushed the switch one more time. And I saw it. For less than a second, a tiny pinprick of red light glowed, then vanished. Was it just a trick of the moonlight? A spark from my tired eyes? Or was it working? Was it now silently recording, a secret witness in the dark? I had no way to know for sure. I had to believe it was. I carefully closed the clock door, my movements slow and deliberate. I had planted the seed. Now I had to wait and see if anything would grow. Just as I turned to leave, I heard it. The soft creak of a doorknob turning down the hall. Someone was awake. Panic seized me. I was too weak to run, too slow to hide. The footsteps were getting closer. They were light, slow footsteps. I scrambled back towards my room, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. My legs felt like lead. I could hear my own heart pounding in my ears, a frantic drumbeat of terror. I was a mouse, and the cat was coming down the hall. I was not going to make it. I stumbled through my bedroom door and fell onto my bed just as the door opened wider. Eleanor stood there, a silhouette against the hall light. "Arthur?" she whispered, her voice sharp with suspicion. I heard a noise. "What are you doing?" Her eyes scanned the room, then landed on me half off the bed, breathing heavily. I was caught. The game was up. My mind raced, trying to find a lie, any lie that would save me. My secret, my tiny little camera, felt like a burning coal in my mind. She could not find out. "The window," I stammered, pointing a shaking finger. "I thought I heard a tapping. A branch, maybe." I let my voice sound frail and confused, the way they all thought I was. I was scared. I let out a weak cough. Eleanor watched me for a long moment, her eyes narrowed. I could see her deciding whether or not to believe me. Then, her face softened into that familiar, fake smile. "Oh, you poor dear," she said, walking over to help me. "You're just having nightmares." Her touch was cold as she pulled the covers over me. I had survived, but it was too close. The next afternoon, she and Robert insisted I sit in my office for a while. "A change of scenery will do you good," they said. They brought in Dr. Finch. I pretended to doze off in my chair, my head tilted to the side, facing the grandfather clock. They thought I was asleep. They started to talk. "He's getting weaker, but it's too slow," Robert said, his voice low and angry. Dr. Finch nodded. "Don't worry," the doctor said, his voice like chipping ice. "Mr. Gable is getting impatient. The new medicine I brought today should finish this by the end of the week." My blood turned to ice. They had just given me a death sentence. I sat there in my chair, pretending to be asleep, but my mind was screaming. The words of the doctor, "Finish this by the end of the week," echoed in my ears like a funeral bell. My own family, my own flesh and blood, had put a ticking clock on my life. My only hope was the tiny, silent camera inside the grandfather clock behind me. Was it watching? Was it recording this nightmare? I prayed that it was, that this old, forgotten piece of metal and glass was capturing the truth that would save my life. Every breath I took felt like I was stealing it back from them. They gently shook me awake, their hands feeling like ice on my skin. "Dad, you fell asleep," Clara said, her voice a soft lullaby hiding a horrible poison. I had to act normal. I had to be the weak, confused old man they wanted me to be. I let my eyes look distant, my voice tremble a little. "Oh, did I? I have the strangest dreams these days," I mumbled. I looked at my son Robert, at my wife Eleanor. Their faces were full of fake worry. It was like looking at beautiful masks with nothing but darkness behind them. Dinner that night was the most terrifying meal of my life. Every time I lifted the fork to my mouth, my hand shook. Was this it? Was the new medicine in the mashed potatoes? In the gravy? I watched them from the corner of my eye. They were watching me too, their smiles tight, their eyes expectant. Underneath the table, I felt Barnaby press his body hard against my legs. He knew. He could feel the fear pouring off me. He let out a low, quiet growl, and my wife quickly said, "Hush, you silly dog." But he wasn't being silly. He was standing guard. I took a small bite of my food. It tasted fine, but I couldn't be sure. I needed a reason not to eat. I needed an escape. As Robert reached across the table for the salt, I moved my arm just enough to knock my water glass over. It tipped, sending water flooding across the table and right into my plate of food. "Oh my!" I cried out, trying to sound upset. "How clumsy of me!" The food was ruined, a soggy mess. I saw a flash of pure rage in Robert's eyes before he hid it. "It's all right, Dad," he said through gritted teeth. "Accidents happen." I had won this tiny battle, but I knew the war was far from over. Later, Eleanor brought me my bedtime tea, just as she always did. But tonight it felt different. The steam that rose from the cup carried a strange smell, something bitter hiding beneath the sweet scent of chamomile. This was it. This had to be the new medicine. My heart felt like a trapped bird, beating its wings against my ribs. I held the warm cup in my hands, its heat doing nothing to stop the cold fear that was spreading through my body. I had to get rid of it. But how? She was watching my every move. "You know, my dear," I said, my voice shaking a little, "my stomach feels a bit upset. I think I need to use the washroom." It was a weak excuse, but it was all I had. I stood up, holding the teacup carefully. "I'll just take this with me," I said, trying to sound casual. "I can drink it when I come back." Eleanor looked at me, her eyes unblinking. For a second, I thought she would say no, that she would force me to drink it in front of her. But she just nodded slowly. "Of course, Arthur." As I walked out, I saw her block the doorway, stopping Barnaby from following me. I locked the bathroom door behind me, my hands trembling so badly that the tea sloshed over the side of the cup. I leaned over the sink, my reflection staring back at me. A pale, terrified old man with fear in his eyes. I poured the tea down the drain and watched it disappear, a swirling vortex of my own potential death. I turned on the water and washed the cup out, again and again, trying to remove any trace of the poison. Who was this man in the mirror? What had happened to the strong, confident man who built an empire? He was gone, replaced by this ghost. When I returned to the bedroom, the cup empty in my hand, they were all there. Eleanor, Robert, and Clara. They were waiting. It was like walking into a room of statues. Their eyes were all fixed on the empty cup. "Did you enjoy your tea, Dad?" Clara asked, her voice too bright. The lie felt thick and heavy in my mouth. "Yes, it was lovely," I managed to say. "It always helps me sleep." They all smiled at the same time. It was the most frightening thing I had ever seen. They believed I had drunk it. They believed their plan was working. I lay in bed for hours, my eyes wide open in the dark. How long did I have? A week? Less? The fear was a physical pain now, a tight knot in my stomach. Just after midnight, when the house was completely silent, I heard a sound from downstairs. A soft clinking, like a spoon against a cup. It was coming from the kitchen. Were they preparing something else? I knew I shouldn't, I knew it was dangerous, but I had to know. I had to see. I slipped out of bed, my feet making no sound on the thick carpet. Barnaby was instantly awake, a silent shadow at my side. I crept down the long, dark staircase, my hand trailing along the cold wall. I moved slower than I ever had in my life, each step a careful, silent prayer. The light in the kitchen was on, a thin yellow line shining from under the door. I put my eye to the keyhole, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure they would hear it. What I saw made the blood in my veins turn to ice. It was Robert. He was standing at the counter with tomorrow morning's teacup. He wasn't using a dropper. He was crushing a large, white pill into a fine powder with the back of a spoon. He carefully scraped all of it into the cup, a look of cold, hard focus on his face. This wasn't a slow poison anymore. They were done waiting. My heart stopped. From the tiny keyhole, I watched my son, Robert, turn a life-giving medicine into a death-bringing powder. The gritty sound of the pill being crushed was the loudest sound in the world. He was so calm, so focused. This wasn't a moment of anger. This was a job. He was finishing a job. And I was the job. I had to get back to my room. If they found me here, they would know I knew. They would not wait until morning. They would finish it right here, right now, on the cold kitchen floor. I backed away from the door, my body moving without me telling it to. Every inch of my being screamed at me to run, but I knew I couldn't. I had to be a ghost. I turned and faced the long, dark staircase. It looked like a monster's throat, ready to swallow me whole. I placed my foot on the first step, praying it wouldn't creak. Silence. Then the next step. Silence. With Barnaby pressed against me, we climbed back into the darkness, away from the terrible light of the kitchen. It was the longest journey of my life. Back in my room, I sank onto my bed, my body trembling like a leaf in a storm. The relief of being safe was gone in a second, replaced by a new, bigger fear. Morning was coming, and with it, that teacup. I couldn't knock it over again. They would become suspicious. I couldn't refuse to drink it. They would force me. A cornered animal will do one of two things: give up, or fight with everything it has left. I was old. I was weak. But I was not ready to give up. I looked around the dark room, my eyes searching for a weapon, for an answer. And then, an idea began to form in the fog of my mind. It was a crazy, dangerous idea. They thought my mind was weak, that I was a confused old fool. I could use that. I could use their own arrogance against them. I would not refuse the tea. I would pretend to drink it. I needed a way to save a sample of the poison tea as proof, and then I would have to act sicker than ever. I had to make them believe their evil plan was working perfectly. My only weapon was their own lie. I couldn't tell anyone my plan. There was no one to tell. Except for Barnaby. I knelt on the floor and wrapped my arms around his warm, furry neck. "They're trying to hurt me, old boy," I whispered into his soft fur, my voice cracking. "They're trying to make me go away forever. But we're not going to let them, are we? You and me. We're going to fight back." He licked the tears from my face, his tail giving one slow, soft thump against the floor. In his quiet, steady presence, I found a little bit of the strength I thought I had lost forever. Morning came too soon. Just as I had seen in my mind, Clara walked in with a cheerful smile and the teacup. "Good morning, Dad. I brought your tea," she said. It sat there on the tray, steaming gently. It looked so normal. But I knew what was hiding in it. I could almost smell the bitter powder underneath the sweet herbs. My whole body wanted to scream, to throw the cup against the wall. But I took a deep breath. It was time for the show to begin. I had to be the best actor of my life because my life depended on it. I reached for the cup with a shaking hand. "Thank you, my dear," I said, my voice weak and raspy. As I brought the cup to my lips, I started to cough. It was a deep, terrible-sounding cough that shook my whole body. "Oh, Dad," Clara said, rushing to my side to pat my back. In that single moment, when her eyes were on my back and not my face, I acted. With a speed I didn't know I had, I tipped the tea not into my mouth, but into a tiny, empty medicine bottle I had hidden in the sleeve of my robe. I saved only a few drops, letting the rest spill onto my chest. "Oh, look at this mess!" I cried, sounding confused. "I am so sorry, my dear." I let the empty cup fall from my hand onto the bedsheets. Clara looked at the tea soaked into my robe, then at the empty cup. A slow, satisfied smile spread across her face. She thought I had drunk most of it before I spilled the rest. "It's okay, Dad. It's okay," she said, her voice soft and gentle. "You just rest now. Everything is going to be all right." I watched her leave the room, and I knew what she meant. For her, everything was going to be all right because she thought I was going to die. I hid the little bottle with the sample of tea deep inside the soil of a healthy plant in my room, a place I hoped they would never look. Now, the second part of my plan had to begin. The waiting game. I stayed in bed all day, pretending to be weaker than ever. I groaned when I moved. I spoke in a whisper. I let my eyes look glassy and far away. I had to convince them. Robert and Eleanor came to check on me, their faces full of fake concern, but I could see the victory in their eyes. They thought they had won. They were already celebrating. But that night, as I lay in the dark, a real pain shot through my chest. It was sharp and sudden, like a needle. It wasn't pretend. Fear, cold and real, washed over me. Had my plan failed? Did some of the poison get into my mouth when I pretended to drink? Was I actually dying after all? The pain came again, sharper this time, and it was getting harder to breathe. I lay there, alone in the dark, unable to call for help, wondering if I had just played my final, foolish part in their perfect crime. The pain in my chest was real. It was a sharp, hot poker stabbing me from the inside. This is it, I thought. My clever plan has failed. I drank some of the poison by accident, and now I am dying for real. I closed my eyes, waiting for the end. I could feel Barnaby's wet nose push against my hand, and then he rested his heavy head on my chest, right over the pain. He whined, a sound of such deep sadness it felt like he was crying for me. His warmth spread through my shirt, a small, steady heat against the fire inside me. And slowly, so slowly, the sharp pain began to fade. It wasn't poison. It was fear. The terror had become so big inside me that my own body was attacking itself. I lay there, breathing in the dusty air of the old room, with my dog's head rising and falling with my every shaky breath. A new feeling washed over me, pushing the fear away. It was anger. A cold, hard anger. They would not kill me with their powders and their drops. And I would not let them kill me with my own fear. I had one more move to make. One more card to play. The little camera in the grandfather clock. I had to see what secrets it held. But how could I get to it? They were watching me like hawks now, waiting for me to take my last breath. I was too weak to walk to the office without them noticing. I needed a distraction. I needed to create a storm so big that they would be too busy to watch the old man in the bed. The plan that came to my mind was dangerous. It would take all the strength I had left. I would have to make them think the end was truly here. I would have to act out my own death, just so I could have a few minutes to live. The next afternoon, as Eleanor sat by my bed, knitting, I took a deep, rattling breath and let out a terrible groan. I clutched my chest, my eyes rolling back in my head. I let my body go limp. "Arthur," she screamed, dropping her knitting. "Robert, Clara, come quick." They burst into the room, their faces a perfect mix of panic and excitement. "He's going," Robert shouted, his voice shaking. "Call Dr. Finch. Tell him it's time." As he fumbled with his phone, I knew I had them. They were completely caught in my trap. Through what seemed like my final, gasping breaths, I whispered a single word. "Photos." They leaned in closer. "What is it, Dad?" Claire asked, her voice trembling. "The old album, in the attic?" I rasped. "The one with your mother, when we were young. Please, I want to see her face, one last time." It was a dying man's perfect last wish. They looked at each other. They didn't want to leave, but how could they refuse? "Please," I begged, putting a tear in my eye. Finally, Robert nodded. "We'll be right back, Dad. Just hold on." The moment I heard their footsteps on the attic stairs, I moved. My feet hit the cold floor. Adrenaline, pure and hot, flooded my body. I was no longer a weak old man. I was a soldier on a mission. With Barnaby at my heels, I half walked, half ran to the office. The house was deadly silent. All I could hear was the frantic beating of my own heart. Every second felt like an hour. I reached the grandfather clock and my shaking hands could barely fit the key into the lock. It clicked open. I reached inside, my fingers closing around the tiny, button-sized camera. I had it. But what was on it? And how could I see it? Then I remembered. The camera came with a special cable that connected to the old, dusty computer in the corner of the office. A computer they hadn't turned on in years. I fumbled with the wires, my mind racing. I could hear noises from upstairs. They would be coming back down soon. The computer whirred and groaned as it came to life. It felt like the slowest machine in the world. Finally, the screen lit up. I plugged in the camera. A single video file appeared. With a trembling finger, I clicked on it. The screen flickered and then my office appeared. It was grainy and the sound was a little fuzzy, but it was clear. I saw them. I saw Robert and Dr. Finch standing right where I was now sitting. And then I heard their voices, cold and clear as a winter morning. "Mr. Gable is getting impatient," Dr. Finch said. "The new medicine I brought today should finish this by the end of the week." It was all there. The proof. The undeniable, heartbreaking proof. A wave of sickness and victory washed over me at the same time. I wasn't crazy. It was all real. I kept watching. The camera had kept recording. A little later, Eleanor and Clara walked into the office. They were laughing about something. "As soon as he's gone," Eleanor said, smiling, "Mr. Gable has promised us. The company will be his, but the entire estate, all the money, it becomes ours." The words hit me harder than any poison. It wasn't just about my money. There was someone else involved. A man named Gable. This was bigger and darker than I ever imagined. Who was he? And what did he have to do with my family's betrayal? Suddenly, I heard the attic door slam shut. Footsteps. They were coming back down the stairs. They were moving quickly. I frantically tried to disconnect the camera, my fingers feeling fat and clumsy. I managed to pull out the tiny memory card just as the office doorknob began to turn. I shoved the tiny card deep into the pocket of my robe. I didn't have time to get back to my room, not even enough time to get back in my chair. The door swung open. Robert stood there, holding the dusty photo album. His face was a mask of confusion, which slowly melted into pure, cold horror as he saw me. Standing, awake, at the computer, I was caught. For a long moment, nobody moved. The only sound was the quiet hum of the old computer. Robert stood in the doorway, his face a white mask of shock. The dusty photo album slipped from his fingers and landed on the floor with a soft thud. He wasn't looking at a weak, dying old man anymore. He was looking at a ghost who had risen from his own grave. I stood there, my legs shaking, but my spirit felt like steel. In my pocket, the tiny memory card felt as heavy and as powerful as a king's crown. The game had changed. Clara and Eleanor came running, drawn by the sound of the fallen album. "What is it? What's wrong?" Eleanor started to ask, then she saw me. Her hand flew to her mouth, and a little gasp escaped her lips. "Arthur, you should be in bed." Clara cried, rushing towards me. Her face was a perfect picture of worry, but her eyes were wide with pure terror. The mask was starting to crack. They could see in my eyes that I knew. I knew everything. The lie that had filled our home for months was finally dying. I held up a hand and my voice came out, not as a weak whisper, but as a clear, cold command. "Stop." They all froze. Even Barnaby, who had been growling softly by my side, went silent. "The performance is over," I said, looking each of them in the eye. "All of you, sit down. Now." For the first time in a very long time, I wasn't the puppet. I was the one pulling the strings. They were so shocked by my strength, by my tone, that they did as I said. They sat on the expensive chairs in my office, looking like naughty children caught breaking a precious vase. Robert was the first to find his voice. "Dad, you're not well," he said, trying to sound reasonable. The medicine is making you confused. Let's get you back to bed." He stood up, but a low, rumbling growl from Barnaby made him sit back down again. "I am not confused, Robert," I said calmly. "In fact, I am seeing things more clearly than I have in years." I turned and pointed a single, trembling finger at the computer screen. "And I have a video I want us all to watch together. A little family movie." I clicked the mouse. And there it was. The grainy image of my own office appeared on the screen. I watched their faces as they saw themselves walk into the frame. I watched them as they heard their own voices, twisted and ugly, filling the silent room. Dr. Finch's cold, clear words, "Finish this by the end of the week," landed like stones in a still pond. I saw the last bit of color drain from Eleanor's face. Clara began to tremble, her hands covering her mouth as if to hold back a scream. They were watching their own evil, and they could not look away. When the video finished, a heavy silence fell over the room. It was a silence filled with guilt and fear. I let it stretch on, letting them sit in the mess they had made. Finally I spoke, my voice quiet but full of the pain they had caused me. "A week," I said softly. "You were going to kill me in my own bed, and you gave me one more week to live." Robert shook his head, his eyes wide. "No, Dad, it's not, you don't understand." But his words were empty. We all understood perfectly. Then I played the second clip. The one where my wife and daughter laughed about what they would do with my money. I watched Eleanor as she listened to her own voice, so happy and carefree, planning a future that was built on top of my grave. "Was it all just about the money, Eleanor?" I asked, my own voice breaking for the first time. 50 years we spent together. 50 years. Was this all our life was worth to you? She couldn't answer. She just stared at the floor, the monster from the video and the woman I married becoming one person right before my eyes. I took a deep breath. I had to know the last piece of the puzzle. "Who is Mr. Gable?" The name dropped into the room like a bomb. All three of them flinched as if I had hit them. Their fear turned into something else, something deeper. They looked at each other, a silent, panicked conversation passing between them. They were more afraid of that name than they were of me. Who was this man? What hold did he have over my family? This was the secret underneath all the other secrets. Suddenly, Robert snapped. The fear in his eyes turned into a wild, cornered rage. "You old fool," he screamed, his face red and twisted with hate. "You were never supposed to find out. You were just supposed to sleep." He lunged forward, not at me, but at the computer, his hands like claws, ready to smash the screen and destroy the proof. He was fast, but Barnaby was faster. With a ferocious bark that I had not heard in a decade, my old, blind dog threw himself at Robert's legs, a loyal, golden shield. Robert yelled as he stumbled backward, tripping over a chair and crashing to the floor. The violence broke whatever was left holding them together. Clara burst into tears, horrible, gut-wrenching sobs of a person who is completely lost. She turned to her mother, her face a mess of tears and anger. "I told you this was wrong," she shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at Eleanor. "This was all your idea. You and him. You and Gable. You said it was the only way. You told us what he would do to all of us if we didn't get him the company." In that moment, the final, terrible truth was revealed. They weren't just murderers. They were prisoners too. Clara's scream echoed in the silent office. The name, Gable, hung in the air, a dark cloud that explained everything and nothing at all. I looked at their faces, and for the first time, I saw something beyond greed. I saw pure, animal terror. My son, still on the floor, looked like a trapped boy. My wife, who had tried to poison me, looked like a woman walking to her own execution. They weren't just killers trying to get my money. They were puppets, and someone else, this mysterious Mr. Gable, was pulling their strings. "Who is he?" I asked again, my voice quiet. The anger was gone, replaced by a cold need to know the whole, ugly truth. Eleanor finally looked up at me, her eyes empty and defeated. "He is a ghost from your past, Arthur," she whispered, her voice a dry rustle of leaves. "A man from a business deal you made 30 years ago. A man you ruined. You probably don't even remember his name, but he never forgot yours. She explained that Gable had spent decades planning his revenge, gathering secrets, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. He hadn't come to them asking for money. He had come with proof of a terrible mistake Robert had made in the company, a mistake that could send him to prison for the rest of his life. He had blackmailed them. But he didn't want my money. He wanted something more. He wanted my life's work. My company. My name. He wanted to own everything I had ever built. And there was one final, terrible condition. He didn't just want me out of the company. He wanted me out of the world. Gone. Forever. He told us if you didn't die of natural causes, Eleanor choked out, tears finally streaming down her face, he would send Robert to jail and ruin Clara's life with secrets he had learned about her. He threatened our grandchildren, Arthur. He put us in a cage with no doors. The terrible picture was finally complete. They had been given a choice, my life or the lives of their children. And they had chosen. The poison in my tea was not just their greed, it was their desperation. It was their answer to a question no parent should ever have to ask. I looked at my family, my beautiful, broken, monstrous family. Did I feel sorry for them? A small, aching part of me did. But the man they had tried to kill, the father they had betrayed, could not forgive them. This was bigger than our family now. This man, Gable, was a cancer, and he had used my own blood to try and destroy me. I walked to the phone on my desk, my movements slow and heavy. I picked up the receiver. Robert looked up from the floor. "Dad? What are you doing?" he whispered, his voice full of dread. "I'm doing what I should have done a long time ago," I said. "I'm calling the police." Clara let out a sob. Eleanor just closed her eyes, as if she had been expecting this all along. I dialed the numbers, my fingers feeling steady for the first time in months. When a calm voice answered on the other end, I told them my name and my address. "I need to report a crime," I said, my voice clear and strong. "A conspiracy to commit murder." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "And who are you reporting?" the voice asked. I took a deep breath. "My wife. And my 2 children." We waited in silence. The ticking of the grandfather clock was the only sound, counting down the final seconds of our life together as a family. No one cried. No one spoke. We just sat there in the ruins of what we once were. I looked at Eleanor, and I remembered the day I married her, how her eyes had sparkled with love and hope. I looked at Robert and Clara, and I remembered holding them as babies, their tiny hands wrapped around my finger. And now they were strangers. Strangers who had wanted me dead. Soon, the room was filled with flashing red and blue lights, painting the walls in colors of blood and sadness. The police were here. They were quiet and professional. They listened to my story. They took the tiny memory card as evidence. Then they walked over to my family. I watched as they put handcuffs on my son, on my daughter, and finally on my wife. As they led Eleanor out of the room, she stopped and looked back at me one last time. Her face was not filled with hate, but with a deep, endless sorrow. "I'm sorry, Arthur," she whispered. And then she was gone. The front door closed. The police cars drove away. And the house fell silent. It was a silence so loud, so empty, it hurt my ears. I had won. I was alive. I was safe. And I had never, in all my 82 years, felt so completely and utterly alone. I was the king of a giant, empty castle, with no one left but my memories and my loyal, old dog. I wandered through the silent rooms, my hand on Barnaby's back. The ghosts of their laughter and their whispers followed me everywhere. I found myself back in the office. The photo album Robert had dropped was still lying on the floor. I bent down and picked it up, my old bones creaking in protest. I opened it to a random page. It was a picture of us a very long time ago. We were all on a beach, young and smiling. We looked so happy. We looked like a real family. A single tear dripped from my eye and landed on the smiling face of my wife. As I went to close the album, a small, yellowed piece of paper, folded many times, slipped out from behind the photograph and fluttered to the floor. It was a note. And I recognized the handwriting. It was Eleanor's from many, many years ago, long before the darkness had ever entered our home. My hands trembled as I unfolded the small, yellowed piece of paper. The ink was faded, but I could still read the words my Eleanor had written so many years ago. It was from our 10th wedding anniversary. It said, "My dearest Arthur, thank you for giving me a life full of laughter and 2 beautiful children. I look at our little family and my heart is so full it could burst. I will love you forever." I read the words over and over again. This was the woman I had married. This was the love I had known. A deep sadness, like a heavy blanket, settled over me. I wasn't just mourning the man they tried to kill, I was mourning the family we used to be. The days that followed were a blur of police officers and lawyers. They told me that with the evidence from the camera and the sample of poison tea, the case was very clear. They also found Mr. Gable. He was a powerful, cruel man who thought he was untouchable. But he wasn't. The truth, once it comes into the light, is more powerful than any man. I did not go to the trial. I could not bring myself to sit in a room and watch my own family be sent away. I already had the only justice I needed. I was alive, and the truth was known. They were sentenced to many years in a place where they could never hurt anyone again. After they were gone, the house became a tomb. It was so big, so grand, and so completely empty. The silence was a constant reminder of what I had lost. All the expensive paintings on the walls, all the polished silver, all the money in the bank, it meant nothing. It was all cold and lifeless. I would sit in my office for hours, just staring out the window. I had everything a man could ever want, but I had no one to share it with. I was the richest, loneliest man in the world. And in that golden cage, I began to feel like I was the one in prison. One evening, as I sat there feeling lost in the darkness, I felt a familiar, gentle weight on my knee. It was Barnaby. He rested his old gray head on my lap and let out a soft sigh. He couldn't see my tears, but he could feel my sadness. He had been there through it all. He was the one who warned me. He was the one who protected me. He was the one who had never, for a single moment, stopped loving me. In that quiet moment, I understood. True wealth is not something you can count. It's something you can feel. It's the warm, steady loyalty of a true friend. That was the day I decided to start living again. I sold the giant mansion, with all of its ghosts and all of its sad memories. I bought a smaller, warmer house with a big, sunny garden. Then, I used my fortune to start a foundation. I called it the Barnaby Trust. It helps 2 groups of forgotten souls, elderly people who are lonely, and old dogs in shelters who are waiting for a loving home. My life was no longer about making money, it was about giving back, about creating connections, about making sure no one felt as alone as I did. My story is a sad one, but I hope it is also a story of hope. It is a story about how the quietest love can be the strongest, and how even in the darkest of nights, a new day can begin. If my journey has touched your heart, if it has reminded you of a loyal friend or a beloved pet who has stood by your side, then I humbly ask for a small kindness. Please, consider subscribing to this channel. You won't just be clicking a button, you will be joining a family of people who believe in the power of truth and loyalty. By subscribing, you are sending a message out into the world. A message that says that we value kindness over greed, and that true love is more precious than gold. It would mean more to this old man than you could ever know. It would be a light in my quiet world, a sign that my story is being heard, and that its lessons are spreading far beyond my own small garden. It is a way of saying that you, too, will always listen to the whispers of your heart and the warnings of a loyal friend. And if you could find it in your heart to share this video, you might be helping someone else who feels trapped in their own lonely mansion. A single share could reach a person who needs to be reminded that they are not alone, and that courage can be found in the most unexpected places. Please, give this video a like, as a small wave to me and Barnaby from wherever you are in the world. It lets us know that you are listening, and that our story has made a difference. Now, my days are simple and they are beautiful. I spend my afternoons in the garden, with the sun on my face and Barnaby sleeping at my feet. He is very old now and he walks very slowly, but his heart is still as strong and as true as ever. We take care of each other. The house is not filled with whispers and lies anymore. It is filled with the sound of birds singing, the smell of fresh-cut grass, and the quiet, steady rhythm of a peaceful life. I have found more happiness in this small house than I ever did in that giant, empty palace. I learned the hardest lesson of all. A family is not just about blood. It's about who stands by you when you are weak, who protects you when you are in danger, and who loves you when you have nothing left to give. My fortune is no longer in my bank account. It is in the wag of an old dog's tail, in the grateful letters I receive from the people my foundation has helped, and in the quiet peace I feel at the end of each day. I lost a family, but I found my purpose. And I found that the greatest treasure a man can ever have is the unwavering love of one good, true, and loyal soul.